Yo guys, what up? How's it going? Viper here, and today I'm gonna talk about the team that I used to essentially play the last push, get the last little bit of elo, and finish rank 1 on the 4th week of the Illuvium leaderboard, reward, snapshot thingy, whatever. Get 9 ILV for that. That's really, really cool. And I've mainly played the Enchanter team. That was the topic in the last video. Just played a bunch of mirrors. Really, really good at that. Really, really good meta to just climb and grind it out because you had so much agency in those mirrors. But then a new meta kind of popped up, new things kind of popped up. So I used a different team for the last few matches. And that is the team that I want to talk about in this video. It is kind of a DLC because it's not a completely new team. It's more a slight variation of one of the previous videos. So make sure to go and check that one out. It's the Jotun dethroned video talking about the Behemoth-Berserker team. And let's jump into this and see what the differences are. So we have essentially, this looks like the same team, right? There's no Ramfire in this one right now because at the end of the week and especially in high elo, and like if my opponents are like 1750 plus, no one is playing 7 Scion, right? But that is probably not the case for you guys. So if you guys face 7 Scions, the first thing that comes to mind here, where's the Ramfire? You should be playing that. I did not use that because no one in my elo is playing 7 Scion. It's kind of a like 1600 elo strategy because you have like too many coin flips to get those super high win rates to just climb to the top with that are needed. So basically you kind of have the exact same setup, the exact same possible opening that you can play, right? You go Lynx Cardulox into Null, into Berserkers, into Mystic plus Titano. That's an 8 unit setup. Now we have 11 Illuviums. What are the other ones for, right? Now there's a bunch of matchups in which a Gazer outperforms a Dorius, mainly ones that go into overtime and where the enemy team is just a bunch of AoE damage, or the enemy team is like a very earth heavy team, things like that. Gazer outperforms a Dorius. Also in like super late game, maybe you want to play a Dorius and Gazer if the Apon is for some reason not very valuable. I think that's a like turn 7-8 thing, probably never happens, but it's worth mentioning. Then Aelon is pretty much the best Illuvial to tech if you have struggled with the shock enemy teams, like Shock Enchanter and things like that, because Aelon's energy resist is 30, which puts it at a lower energy resist than the Lynx, and it is a verdant Illuvial, so the shock flat damage will just hit it and hit it and hit it, but Aelon has a lot of health regeneration from Verdant and from its own ability, so Aelon will be able to tank that shock damage for very, very long and allowing your Lynx and your Berserkers to essentially push through the enemy team while they are not getting finished off by shock. So Aelon, super good attack card in the shock matchup. How do you utilize the Aelon versus the shock teams? Well, one of the main things is you can essentially try to skip the Cardulox because it's only offering Toxic and Colossus, and both of those traits are not very strong versus the shock versions of those teams. The shock versions of those teams have very little damage into your front line. They really try to like pseudo-assassinate your damage dealers. So you can kind of get away. Turn 1, really difficult, probably can just skip turn 1 or something like that, equip like a 70 cost weapon, 20 cost suit, I don't know. Turn 1, it's hard to do. But on turn 2, you can do something like just play Null, go with Nature Sword and Riplins, bond for Verdant Berserker on your Ranger, and then you have the Riplins as a Berserker, your Ranger, Verdant Berserker, Null, Verdant, and just a tank, and you have enough points left to play the Lynx, and you kind of just play the normal game from there, with essentially going Aelon and Monkey on turn 3, something like that, and that is going to be very, very strong versus the shock openings because your Ranger will kind of die, but it will still activate Verdant, it still has the Berserker buff to make your team stronger, and then Aelon can tank afterwards, and essentially just this triple Verdant setup is enough to just survive versus the frontline damage that the Shock Enchanter version is doing, because they don't really have the Singe, they don't really have this Magma, they don't really have much damage coming in outside of Shock and Enchanter procs. Enchanter procs, pure damage, so just Verdant healing is pretty much a hard counter to that. So you're good in the Shock matchup, that's what a lot of people were still playing. Then you're good in this new popping up team where they played like Verdant Behemoth and things like that. Now a different kind of Verdant Behemoth than this one, where they played more Bulwark line, and I have more of a Colossus line. Now why did I use this Colossus line? Well, essentially the Colossus line has better late game than Bulwarks. That's kind of the TLDR, and also Apon and Mankier together are really, really good versus other melee damage dealers because Mud attack speed slow is really, really insane. Then yeah, Titanor is a better stun than Scaraborg, Null is better CC ability, then it's fine, and so on. So you just essentially are playing the better late game units at that point. That's the main reason I played this. I think this is the best melee damage dealer versus other melee damage dealer team that you can be playing. And to beat the Enchanter teams, the shock teams that used to be kind of the problem for this, we now have added this different opening where turn 1 is difficult, but after that turn 2, 3, 4, you are way stronger versus those shock teams. And yeah, if shock kind of doesn't have a late game option, so they kind of have to go for the other late game, and then they had to sell some units, and it's just going to turn out well for you because your power level is higher than the enemy power level. Now, the other really cool thing that I think is very important, that is coming up very often as well in melee versus melee damage teams on like turn 6, 7-ish basis, is that usually you open with the Water Shield Cardulox, right? And then you swap to the Verdant Shield, you have Verdant Colossus. Now, late game, you can either, for example, sell the Lynx, which I don't really want to advise for. Lynx is literally a endgame board, late game unit. It's a super high damage dealing unit, but maybe in some matchups your Lynx just keeps dying and you can't figure out how to protect it. Sure, then go sell the Lynx. The other units are slightly tankier. But most of the time, I would say just sell the Cardulox, and you can go for Jotun, and then you can do, well, Bond for Null for Verdant Behemoth, and then you have literally this Doom squad of Jotun, Lynx, Ryplans, Mankir, and Behemoth Ranger. You have 5 really strong damage dealers, and you have 2 big tanks in front, and you have a Darius and Apon that are very supportive of them, that should be winning you most of those melee damage dealer mirrors. Another late game option that you have, you don't even have to go for this Jotun play. I can elaborate a bit more on the Behemoth early game options. You can also just sell Cardulox, replay Cardulox, which is more or less a positioning switch, and you can bond for a 70 cost sword with Ryplans as well, for Verdant Berserker in the late game, and you can maintain your Cardulox as the frontline unit. So those are the late game options there. There's no really like clear thing when you should go for which one. It depends on the current state and positioning of the game. If you feel like you need the extra frontline, okay, just rebond to your Ryplans. You want to have that extra damage dealer on turn 6, turn 7 for sure. That Ranger is so strong, especially in the 70 cost weapon and 40 cost suit combination. And if you feel like you don't need the extra frontline unit, if you feel like you just need more damage, or you need the Behemoth stuns and something like that, you can just fully sell the Cardulox and rebuy the Jotun for it. Now, in some other matchups where, for example, your opponents try to do some Rampfire early game shenanigans or some, I don't know, rogue or melee things, whatever, right? You can just do the normal Cardulox opening, Cardulox, Lynx, Toxic Shield, and on turn 2, you can consider to just swap to a Water Sword and go for Jotun on turn 2. For example, if you're playing versus like a Rampfire 5 Earth team, Rampfire 5 Earth, obviously Water Jotun is gonna get hyper very quickly. Water Sword is gonna get hyper very quickly. And if you have these attack speed buffed behemoths, they will not allow the Rampfire to ever cast. They will literally just perma-stun the Rampfire. So that is a very strong counter against that. I had been playing against a couple people who were doing these like Rampfire all-in cheesy team comps in higher elos. So that's why I thought, okay, well, I do want to have this Jotun option for turn 2 even with the Water Jotun and the Water Sword to counter that Earth and Fire setup and just perma-stun that Rampfire. Don't let that Rampfire get a cast off. That has been working for me pretty well so far, if they are playing this Earth Fire setup, which has been the standard. And then from there, you can kind of play a bit different routes because you don't have to end on the same 8-unit board all the time. If you can play more on this Behemoth focused one with Jotun and Colossus, you can skip the Berserkers, and you can even go for utility units like Aelon and just tanks in that sense. Or you can go for the Berserkers if you feel like you need even more damage. But again, in that scenario, I would be playing versus like a Rampfire, so I'd probably just go for utility with Apon, with Aelon, with Null, getting those Verdant healing fields up, getting those AoE stuns in. So you guys see, even though it's only 11 Illuviums, it's not some like 2 teams mixed together kind of thing. You have a tremendous amount of different options against all these different enemy team comps. Now there's no Rampfire in here at the moment. You can just cut a couple augments and just go for Rampfire, Fire Weapon, and Void Sash. The energy, starting energy is suit for your Ranger. That is like the combo versus 7 Psion usually. I didn't go for that because I wasn't playing against any of those. I had this one augment as a contingency, essentially essentially if I would face one, where then I would just play for the Fawns option and I would play a full-on tank version of this team versus 7 Science, hoping that the 7 Science just kill themselves against the Fawns when they are attacking the Null or the Titano, depending on who I would put it on. I'd probably go for Null and combine it with the health regen augment, and that would be my win condition, just Fawns, Null versus Science, because I wanted to have a couple extra augments for the mirror-ish matchups, and I wanted to have things like the Water Sword. But yeah, if you face a lot of Science enemies, then certainly go and you can cut this deflector thing, you can cut the redemption core, you can probably cut like parasitic link, you can cut the photogenic crit chance combo as well. Like here, you usually choose crit amp and you give crit chance to one of your damage dealers. But if you have so many damage dealers already, then you don't really need this combo. This combo is more combo for if you stay on the Colossus Ranger option for the late game. So if you're swapping off Colossus Ranger, you don't really need this extra damage combo, and you can sacrifice this for more tech cards and more utility. But again, I wasn't playing against any of those things. I want to show you guys that team. Now, there's also one late game positioning thing that might change with the Cardulox and so on, and that is where I want to jump into the last video that I made about this team, and this is essentially a DLC video of this, so let's just check that out for a sec. Here we have one part of the last video that I made talking about this Berserker team already, and one thing that in the meta has kind of been evolving ever since we played those Jotun mirrors with 5 Bulwark Frost, where we started to wall off one side of the board, especially if we have our damage dealers on the same side, has been that, yeah, you just wall off one side. Now, I don't really have a good like clip to show this, and this is more of like a talkative explanatory thing anyways, so I hope that's gonna work out for you guys. But basically, you guys see big tank guys here, big tank guys here on both sides. Now, my opponent was on the opposing side, right? If my opponent is on this side as well, opponent would wall off, I would wall off, our damage dealers walk here, they meet here. That's usually how this matchup goes nowadays. But now if we both wall off before our guys, then let's say the enemy wall is here and my wall is here. My wall is in front of my guys, enemy wall is in front of the enemy guys. That would mean that the tanks on the edges have nothing to attack, so they walk forward and they try to circle around. The same here, they walk forward, they try to circle around, and the tanks in the middle, they like try to, I don't know, maybe walk here, maybe walk here, maybe walk here. It's a bit weird, right? There's no like clear pathing if you don't have them in front of each other and they don't just sit still at the beginning of the fight. So we can jump forward in this video, right? Like usually in these matchups, oftentimes you would just have like a tank here, just a tank in front of the enemy team, and then this would be positioned here where it's really hard to swap into. Like my opponent can open this up. This is essentially a wall, right? My opponent could open up this wall, swap the melee damage dealers over here, but it's really difficult to do that, and you're not really guaranteed to have a focus on my units because I still have my tank here. There's not a lot of space for my units, so my tank would probably walk up, and it's very, very hard to do these switches versus this setup. But if it's like wall versus wall, then you open it up, and then it's kind of like chaos, right? And against this chaos thing, just having extra more damage dealers is really, really good. Against this chaos thing, the most risky thing that can happen is if your Apon that's usually positioned in the middle behind your Cardulox, because Cardulox like in the middle on turn 1, then Null is usually in front of the enemy damage dealer. The Lynx is on this side, so Null is in front here. If Lynx would be on this side, Null would be in front here. And yeah, you play on that. Again, check out the other video for like all the in-depth positioning things. I don't want to repeat everything here. The main thing that I want to point out on is that, for example, this Titano in a lot of the current positionings in the meta would be usually here, and the Null would be slightly on this side. Or the Null would be full on here and the Titano would be here, so that you have Titano ability shooting where all the damage dealers meet, Null ability shooting where all the damage dealers meet. That is the current standard that people do. And the way, it's like the weird one about that is, then one player like moves the full front line on this side, and they have wall here, you have wall here. But that means usually that their tanks or damage dealing units can attack your Apon and just finish off your Apon. So that is the scary thing about that, and that feels a bit difficult to handle at the moment. That's also when having the Jotun, having the Berserker Ranger also comes in, because just having more damage dealers is clutch. Because at this, like the chaos state, if you don't have your both walls here, if it becomes chaos, like the units just work randomly, which here is like kind of similar. Now at the moment people play like a Twine and Bulwark and Aelon and things like that. They don't necessarily play the Colossal setup. They play 5 Bulwarks, 3 Bulwarks, but it kind of still is blocking your front line and having your just like melee damage dealers arrive late and focus fire one target. And this is kind of the more relevant part on all of this, even just having all of your damage dealers focused down one single target. And that kind of clutch thing means at the moment, if you don't have this like wall on one side and you have this fair thing where everything is the same, but you have something like, I don't know, one tank here, one tank here, one tank in the middle, or you have a wall on this side, you have a wall on the other side, and then they all like scramble and the Colossus taunt, and it's very unpredictable to happen what really happens, especially because of the Colossus taunt. The best thing to do is have your Ranger become a damage dealer at like the turn 6, 7 stage of the game, and just add this extra damage dealer unit so that you have a better chance of having 2+ damage dealers focusing down the same enemy unit, preferably a damage dealer. But even if you're focusing down an enemy tank, then, well, the enemy tank is still gone, and then they probably do switch to damage dealer afterwards. And if the enemy team was not focus firing down units, if they were attacking units like one guy on one guy, the next guy on another one, the next guy on another one, then you probably did finish that tank very quickly, and you can then switch to their damage dealers, and you're still in a very favorably winning outcome. That's like the main takeaway. That's like the main evolution that we've had so far in these melee damage dealer mirrors, especially here where we like, okay, well, augments are good and so on, but augments are still not that strong in the game, and upgrading ranger weapons plus suit is very, 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 very powerful late game. So yeah, just trying to implement the Sword Ranger into this team has been very, very good. You can try to do that with the sell Cardulox into play Jotun, reduced to 2 tanks, or you can just sell Cardulox, replay Cardulox, probably reposition, and just switch the Ranger to 70 cost Sword plus 40 cost suit and bond to the Nature Riplins in that case. You can even consider playing 2 Riplins because of that, because in some matchups you want to have Nature, in some matchups you want to have Water Riplins. It really does make a big difference in some matchups to have the Water Riplins. So it really, really depends on the current meta that you're facing. That's why I can't really give you like, here is this one team, copy this, let's go. Because you guys certainly are facing a different meta at 800 elo, 1000, 1200, 1400, 1600, 1800, and like 1900. There's different meta games, different players you face, different preferences, different teams, and so on and so on. That's why a lot of these times, like here, like Nature Riplins, that's like the cookie cutter, nice one. But if you face against a bunch of like Earth and Fire teams, for example, then the Water Riplins would go crazy. The same with the Monk here. Having Water Monkey are good against Earth, obviously, but really weak if your enemy is playing like air teams and such. Right now, you have Nature to counter the air, so less of a worry. But hey, Earth could get hyper versus Fire and Nature, for example. Water gets hyper versus Earth. So it really depends on what you're playing against here. That's really, really, I don't know, important thing basically in the game, to just realize what are you facing at the moment, how could you adjust your units, your team, even just on this dominant affinity standpoint. So I hope this was a good DLC to the last video, a bit shorter, a bit less in depth, but I just wanted to add what I've gotten rank 1 with last week, and we've pretty much been seeing a super, super rapidly changing meta again. I kind of hope for a new patch soon. I'm not so happy about the current meta. I feel like there's a lot of really cheesy teams that are just, I don't know, really hard countering one thing and then losing to everything else. And yeah, just having the game decided in the loading screen is not that cool, and it kind of like annoys me, makes me not want to play that much. That's why I like these Berserker teams, that's why I like these Behemoth teams. They usually don't decide the game in the loading screen. The same with the Enchanter team. Like, they are just fundamentally good teams against most things. They have just a good units, good stat checking other enemies, and positioning does matter a lot, especially on the melee carries, and positioning mattered a lot on the Enchanter teams as well, because there was so much with hyper and focusing down units and so on. Really, really cool matchups. I enjoyed playing those a lot, but there are more and more of those like all-in cheesy teams that just hard counter one thing and you win or lose in the loading screen. So yeah, I hope that we just have like a million more people playing the game, and then I don't have to play versus the cheese teams in high elo, because they certainly won't make it there. Or yeah, we just, I don't know, do something about it. Well, what are you guys' takes on that? Do you guys like this like loading screen deciding like on matchup what you win or lose with? What do you guys think about it? It's like stuff like 7 Psion, right? Like you play this Berserker team, you don't have Ramfire in, can't beat 7 Psion, or very, very difficult to beat it. And things like that, right? But then you play 7 Psion, you play versus like a Ramfire, well, you have no chance of winning. You play a 7 Psion, you play versus 5 Air Gyro, you have no chance of winning. You play 5 Air Gyro, you see the Enchanter team, you have no chance of winning, right? It's like these like 5 Air Gyro or 7 Psion or like these all-in, like early game-oriented teams. What do you guys think about them? Do you guys like that? Do you guys not like that? Do you guys like this like early game team into like full sell, play a new team where you kind of just, I don't know, you take the coin and you flip, is the opponent swapping or not? What are you guys' takes on that? I would like to hear that a lot, because I don't know, I have my opinions, obviously. And yeah, I want to know what everybody else thinks. So I appreciate everybody that watched the video. I hope it gave you guys some value. I'm still streaming pretty much every day on Twitch. Not as long hours anymore, but I'm trying to get there, trying to do my best, you know. And yeah, everybody that liked the content, wants the content to continue, please click the like Illuvium ref link thingy like once a week. It's for this creator rewards program. If you have family members, friends that want to check out Illuvium, tell them to like click that link and then go to Epic and download it or whatever. That would also be very much appreciated. Certainly does help with keeping up the videos and so on. And see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.